All right, CNT125 Risk Management Lab. We looked at some protocol. We did some passwords. We looked at some protocols. We then even used some scanning tools to assess some of our devices. We're going to do a little bit more security. We're going to implement some security best practices on our switches. One of the first, actually, two different things we're going to do here. One is we're going to shut off unused ports. If a port is not being used, somebody could potentially plug into it, get access to the network. It might be a port, might be a network port that's in a hallway that a visitor could plug into. So we're going to shut off ports that we're not using so that they are not an entry into the network. So I'm connected into my top switch now. So we'll do enable config T. Oops, class, excuse me. Okay. I'm going to shut off the ports I'm not using, and I'll test that. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do some port security on the switch ports as well. That's the second thing we'll do. All right, so on my top switch, I'm going to take the ports, I'm going to take ports 11 to 24, and we're going to shut those off. So we're just saying those are ones we're not using in our network. So config T, interface range, we're going to say FA0/11-24. That's one of the reasons we used our gig port today. And we're going to just do the shutdown command. We're going to turn those ports down, turn those ports off in the down state. And that way, if somebody tries to plug into them, they won't have access to the network. So we're going to wait for all this to scroll by. Let's do a show run. So I'm going to do a control C there. I'll do a show run. And if I look next to the first couple ports here, they're normal. And 11 to 24 now, I see the word shutdown next to them. So if somebody were to try to plug into those switch ports, they won't have access to the network. Okay, so let's save our config, copy, run, start. And what we're going to do is test that. Now, don't forget to repeat this on your other switch. I've done that previously, so I'm going to keep moving. I'm not going to take the PC that I have, and I'm on this side of my network right now. I'm going to take this PC, and I'm going to plug it into port 12, 13, 14, something like that. So I'm actually going to do that right now. I'm going to take that PC, I'll plug it into, port 14, 15 kind of thing. I'm actually plugged into 15. I'm going to wait a second and observe the link light on the switch. And what I will probably see is I won't get a link light on the switch. Yes, that port is off, just like I shut the lights off in the room. So if somebody were to try to plug into that, they won't have connection. There was zero connection here. So after I've seen that, I'm going to plug my PC back into 6 to 10 range. 6 to 10. 6 to 10 is going to be a range we're not going to do anything on. So these are kind of our default functioning ports. So there is shutting off my excess ports. And I should even see the console over here showing me that. So this would prevent somebody, maybe a port in the hallway, a visitor, plugging in and getting access to the network. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put some port security on. We're going to do the first 5 ports. We're going to do the port security in the first 5 ports. So 11 to 24 will be off. 1 to 5 will have security, and 6 to 10 will be I'm going to leave those alone so I have ports to test with. So there will be nothing configured on those. So we're now going to do ports 1 to 5. So config T, interface range, FA0/1-5. And we'll say, okay, on these 5 ports, we're going to put security on here. What we're going to do is we are going to set it so that a maximum of 1 MAC address may be on this port. So if a second MAC address shows up, maybe, you're in, a hacker is in an office and they unplug the office computer and plug their laptop in. When that second MAC address shows up, we're going to set it to shut that port down. So it's going to prevent somebody from maybe disconnecting the office computer and plugging their laptop in, or plugging a hub or switch in and plugging their laptop in and getting access. As soon as that second MAC address shows up, it's going to shut that port down. So we need a couple things here. We need switch port mode access as opposed to trunk. We need switch port security. So switch port. Oh my goodness. Port security. We need switch port security maximum 1, as in maximum 1 MAC address. And we're going to say port security MAC address sticky. What that means is when it learns a MAC address, it's going to stick it there and hold on to it. So, you know, the employee computer boots up, it holds on to that MAC address. If another one comes online, it's going to be like, that's the second one. And now we're going to set what happens, what's the violation, what's going to happen here. Well, we're going to set the option to shut that port down. Now, we can actually put aging timers and things in here that it would do it for a period of time and then come back online. For now, we're just doing, you know, bold, shut this port down. So we're going to do exit, exit. Let's do a show run, and we should see again the first, we should see the first 5 ports here has set up for port security, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next 5 ports, 6 to 10, we haven't done anything with. We're leaving them alone. That's like our control. And then 11 to 24 is all shut down. So a couple practices to limit access on our switch. So let's copy, run, start that. The next thing we're going to do, let's actually look at the actual port security that we have configured. So show port security. And we see that the first 5 ports, we've set the MAC address at basically 1. And the violation is we're going to shut those ports down. Right now, there's no MAC addresses on. We have nothing plugged in, so it has learned no MAC addresses. Let's look at port security of interface. I'm just going to pick on FA05. That's the one we're going to end up using. We say port security is enabled. Violation is shut down. Maximum MAC address, we have none. It has learned none so far. So this is basically in the default ready state. Okay. Yeah, and if we didn't do it already, save your config. Repeat this config on the other switch for a little bit of practice. I did my other switch previously. Now we're going to move on to testing. So I'm going to take this PC again. This is where I'm at in my network. I'm right here. I'm on this PC. I'm going to take this PC and I'm going to move it into port 5 on the switch. So one of the ports we configured for security. I'm going to leave this console open so I can see messages pop up in there. So I'm going to take this PC. I'm on my top switch. I'm moving the PC over to port 5. This is one of my ports configured for security. I'm going to notice the link light. It's orange. Hopefully it'll settle down to green. That's what I should hopefully be seeing here in a second. Because it's learned that MAC address, and it should settle down to be a usable port. Waiting. Waiting. We can do it. We can do it. There we go. Now we're at a green state. This computer is on that switch port. It is functioning, and I should even be able to do things like ping my gateway 0.1, and I can. So this is now a node into that port. It's configured for security, but it's functioning in the network. So let's take a look at the port security now. So I'm going to use the port security, and I'll see that on port 5, max security address 1, and we have a current 1 MAC address on there. Okay, so let's now look at the security of port 5, and we'll see, again, maximum MAC address, there's 1 on here, and this is the MAC address that it has learned, 1866DA, blah, blah, blah. And if I were to come over here and do ipconfig/all, I should hopefully see 1866DA 28400B. 28400B. Yes, there it is. That is the MAC address that it has learned on that switch port, which is this PC. Cool beans. Everything's working as it should. We're now going to cause a fault. We're just going to turn on our Linux VM so that it creates another node on this port, another MAC address in this port, and we're going to watch this console here to see what happens. So I'm going to go over here to my virtual machine, my VMware. I'm going to launch that, and I'm just going to launch the CNT125 Mint NMS. I'm just going to launch that one. And it looks like it has not been launched before, so I'll say I copied it. I'm just going to let this thing boot, but I'm going to watch this console over here. When it gets far enough that it actually enables that NIC and connects to the network, or tries to connect to the network, the switch port's going to sense a second MAC address, and we're going to watch the console over here. And we see right away, error disabled, violation error detected on blah. It's putting in an error disabled state. It has created a security violation caused by MAC address, blah, blah, blah. This is the second MAC address on this port. So if I look at my switch port now, I see that switch port is orange. It is in a disabled state, and it's going to stay there. It won't go anywhere. So if I were to, I'm going to come over here to my command prompt. Let's try a ping again. It worked a couple seconds ago. If I try it now, I'm probably going to get timeout, 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 or destination unreachable. And I am. This is no longer a functioning connection on that switch port. Okay, I'll leave my VM run right now. But let's now look at some security now that we have created the violation. Let's see what show run shows me. And we're on port 5. That's the one we're looking at. Let's see if it shows anything under the running config. It actually shows this right here, 1860-60A. That's the MAC address that is learned. So that shows me a little bit. But let's look at the port security. And we see one MAC address, one limit, one MAC address, and security violation 1. And it's letting us know that that port, there's been a violation. Well, let's look at the details on port 5. And this right here is letting us know it's disabled. Secure shutdown, port status. It has been shut down. Well, let's look at the actual interface config, is the actual interface itself. Show interface fast ethernet 01. So if I do a show int FA0/5, this shows the specifics of that interface. And if I look up here at that very first line, we see it is down, line protocols down, error disabled. This port is off. This port is shut off because we have created that violation with the second MAC address. So if somebody were to, again, remove the employee computer connection and put their laptop in, or put a switcher hub in to try to put their, another computer in, whether it be a little Raspberry Pi or something like that, as soon as it sends that second MAC address, that port is shut down. So that helps with, between these two things, we're shutting off ports we're not using. Up here, we're shutting off ports we're not using. That's limiting the number of ports people can connect with. And then doing some port security limits, in this case, another MAC address or something showing up. These are all pieces of a bigger puzzle to minimize the risks on your network. All right. The only thing left to do here is, again, if you haven't done this on the other switch, do that for extra practice, or your port security over on the other switch. The only thing left to do is start gathering our configs for submission. So what you want to do at this point, console back into your 2011 router, save that config, RISC 2011 config, console into the 4221, show run, save that config. Do both switches, top switch, bottom switch. We're saving all these configurations, the SSH, the telnet, the passwords, the port security, all that stuff. We're saving all those configs now. And I put down here a reminder of the things I should have gathered up before I submit. The routing table from the beginning. We have 3 Wiresharks from Telnet SSH RDP. We have the Nmap scam of the router. And then we have the 4 configs we're gathering right now. Make sure you have all of those before you do any cleanup. Cleanup for the lab. For the switches, we can just do an erase start, and that'll clear everything off because we didn't configure any sort of VLANs. For the router, we need to delete the encryption key. So we need to run this crypto key zeroize RSA. We'll accept yes to delete that. Then we'll do the erase start. Okay? Make sure you shut your VM down. Make sure you return your cables. Make sure on the second Windows PC you disable RDP, so go turn that off. And then move your cables back to the college network and assemble them, or configure them for DHCP. And then we can come down here and answer our questions and submit our files. And I tried to put them all here again for you so you knew. There is a couple questions here for Telnet SSH. Those should be pretty easy now. Port number for RDP is pretty easy. RDP safe should be pretty easy. And think back to some of the security things we did. What are some of the security practices we did in the router switches? Passwords. What security practices we do on the switch? Those are the last 2 things we did. And then you're looking up what AUP, acceptable use policy, and password policy would be for a network. And there is our risk management lab.